I recently read The Tainted Khan, and let's talk about it. This is a book to Dragon Rider, and if you haven't seen my Dragon Rider vlog, what are you doing here? It's a little bit unhinged, and I actually fell in love with this book. It is with Dragon Rider. It's like Eragon but adult, but more culture added to it, and there's not much more I can do to explain that series because that is basically what it is. Dragon Rider and The Tainted Khan both felt like a story I knew really, really well, and yet I'd never read before, if that makes any sense. It doesn't change anything about the Dragon Rider trope. There isn't a lot of dragon riding in the first book, nor really in the second. It's very much a story about a little bit about oppression, a little bit about what happens when you are taken as a ward into the country to work for the guy who was responsible for killing your father and taking over and not even taking over your country, but somebody then sued for peace, and you're there, you're trapped, and there's nothing else to happen. And then in book one there's a big tragedy that happens that pushes the main character Jai into what is the story. I finished it today, a couple of hours ago, and it's one of those ones, I think this is the fastest time I finished a book that is this big, and I freaked out when I got the arc for this. But The Tainted Khan, we move straight on into, so you leave the events of Dragon Rider and you're straight onto the events in The Tainted Khan. There's no time skips, you're just straight there. And at first it does the same kind of thing that the Dragon Rider does, is at the beginning of it is slow. And if you're looking for a heavy action-packed story, you're just not going to get that here. This is very much a story on Jai's journey, but also a story on what would you do in this kind of situation, right? Like, he's trying to gather people to take on the Sabines, who are then re-invading the Stepfolk, which is Jai. But the trouble with Jai, which is what I loved about the beginning, but I can also see where people might struggle with the beginning of this book, is you're showing Jai, who was taken from his homeland as a very young child, believe he was 4. He's now come back and he's filled with that shame of, I don't know about my own culture. I was never taught this. I don't remember much of the language, having to relearn everything. And he's the heir, basically, to a great tribe. All these sort of kind of conflicts that are woven throughout that felt a little bit shallow, but for the story that Taran Matharu wanted to tell, I can kind of let it slide a little bit, right? It didn't bother me as much. I can kind of see how a couple of things would have come back around, and if it was a bit more of an in-depth story, you can kind of see how it could have been explored a little bit more. As you're reading this book, sometimes you sort of feel like you know where the story is going, which is fine, it's predictable, it's not a problem. It's predictable in a good way. It's predictable in the fact that it feels like something you already know, but at the same time you're not sure how they're going to get to their goal, but you know they're going to achieve their goal. If that makes any kind of sense, I don't know. But there are times you're going through and you're coming through this conflict and you're sort of like, I know where this conflict could be leading, but also why is this conflict here? Like, why is it here? Why are you leading it this way? Or, you know, why are you inserting it in? Where the author isn't going to go that in depth to with this little conflicts throughout. And it does kind of all tie together. So if you look at it from like a bird's eye overview, you can kind of see like, oh, that makes sense, why everything's sort of wrapped around and like this. And I don't know how many books it's going to be. It says it's a saga, so it could be more than 3 books. I don't know. I'm hoping it's going to be more than 3 books because I'm just loving this. But I definitely knew that this book was going to be Jai's journey on rebellion, on gathering his forces to then take on the Sabines. And that is basically what we got. It wasn't anything different. I love the exploration of more of the cultures. So you have the Sabines and you have the Stepfolk, which is Jai. And then you have the Danks, which we still don't know much about the Danks, but then we have the Calites, I think they're called, which the creatures in this is making my autistic heart so happy. Do you want to know why? Fucking dinosaurs. And I'm not saying there's dinosaurs in this book, but there are terror birds. And terror birds are extinct. Same with the Kiroi that they ride is basically an old extinct version of a rhino. but really hairy and big and stuff. And I'm sitting here and my heart is like, hold this, because I want more books to utilise extinct animals, because I love them. I love the extinct dinosaurs. Mammoths are in this, woolly mammoths, and they ride them. It makes my heart so happy that these creatures and the world building is just there, and I want more of it, to the point that I have an idea in my head. I'm like, any book, I'm gonna put this in. I'm just gonna, any excuse to have dinosaurs, to have dragons, to have everything. And there is a point on the dragons that he does do something different. Like, the whole magic system is a cultivation magic system, which, if you don't know what that is, I can't really explain it very, very well. I suggest you go look it up because I can't look it up currently to explain it because my phone is there. It's a really, really unique magic system. It works on mana and it works on the core. So you have a core inside of you that can fill up with mana, but it can stretch and grow. But there's also a risk with anything that happens. So you can ascend, and then you have a bigger core and you can hold more mana and stuff like this. And there's way also learning how to channel the mana and going up, and you can be a 5th soul loader bound, and the highest you can go so far is the 7th. And, you know, you're learning through this. Jai is also learning through this. And this is kind of where I can kind of see, I can't really see another way of doing this. I think this was the only option, but it is a critique, is that it felt like Jai didn't really struggle enough, and he got to this point too quickly. He achieved all of his goals, especially with the magic, far too quickly for something that is meant to be really difficult to have. And it could just, and it is believable that he did it because of the trials that Jai's going through, the things that he has suffered all of his life. He was suffering in book 1, he was at this really bad prison at the end of book 1, he was tortured, he was all of this, he's done, so he has suffered, so he can sort of move his body and stuff like this. And then you get, you know, he goes through even more in book 2. People are always constantly calling him into question, which I love. I love that. They're calling his right into question. Why am I following you? Make me believe I'm following you. You want me to fight in this rebellion? Prove it. But with that, they are asking him to prove himself, but on top of asking him to prove himself, you get he does the thing to prove himself, and he kind of achieves it a little bit too easily. Like, there was a certain fight with a certain character, which the character I hated and liked and then hated again, and it didn't go where I thought it was going to go, but there was that sort of fight, and then I sort of thought it would be a little bit more of a harder battle, in a sense, a harder fight, where you're sort of like, it's predictable. Like, the book is predictable. It's predictable in the way that I knew Jai was going to reach his goal, so I knew that he was going to, let's say, win this fight, but I didn't know how he was going to do it, and it's the how that I wanted to keep me intrigued. In this particular scene, it just seemed to happen too quickly. And then, like, the ending battle as well, that, it was good. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think Taran Matharu's strength is in fight scenes or battle scenes. And I don't know if it's because I've read, like, John Gwynne and Brandon Sanderson, that I'm expecting a lot more, but it just didn't have me hooked. There was some things that I was sort of like, okay, this is going to happen and this is how it's going to play out. There was no sort of tension. It was there, but not enough for me, so to speak. But I still had a hell of a good time. I enjoyed this book a lot. Learning more about Jai and Winter and the dragon, how that works, and there was a really cool kind of world building element that ties to the magic system and ties to dragons, that I read that and I was like, that's cool, because I've never seen it before. That's where it came like a little bit unique, and I liked it on that side of it. The romance, I'm not here for the romance. It's very, very minimal in the book. I personally like more emotion with my romance, but again, it's very, very side plot, hardly there. I was budging reading this with a friend, and he commented on the thread and he was like, didn't expect spice, and I was like, dude, that ain't spice. It's very, very tame, very, very tame. I wouldn't really even call it spice, but again, there is a certain scene that insinuates something more happening, and you sort of get more than fade to black, right? So it's not the whole fade to black, this happens. You get a little bit more and then it fades to black, but it's not really, in my opinion, I wouldn't really count it as spice, because again, I think anybody could read it. I look at this series as if a bridge from YA to adult. It is marketed as adult, and I do say it is adult, but it's, again, somebody who's coming from YA to adult could also read this and be also fine. Whereas if you're very much an intermediate or an experienced reader of adult fantasy and you've read Malazan and all of this might not be the book for you because it's not as complicated. It's there, you know what's happening, and you're just along for the ride. And that was me. I was simply along for the ride, and I had so much fun. It had dragons, which I loved. It had immense world building, the terror birds, which was incredible, and even like the world building around the cultures, like Jai's culture and then the Kazites culture. And we don't know much about the Danks yet, but I think that's coming in the next book. And learning about everything, and then there was a reveal at the end. And I kind of suspected where the reveal was going to go. I'm going to insert a clip here of me finding out the reveal. I kind of knew, but I also didn't. I suspected something, and I was halfway right. But there was a moment I was like, I was wrong, but it was wrong in a way I was like, no way. And then I went, hang on a second, isn't that to the point I have to go reread something, because of something that was said throughout the book that could have been, and I think that is the intention, is Jai, I think, perceived something in Annie was wrong on his perception of it. So when this reveal happened, you're like, oh my god, but then you go, hang on a minute, but wasn't this and you're kind of a bit like, that's not meh. But I generally think that's probably Jai just perceiving something that wasn't actually written down in text. I don't actually think it was mentioned from the text he was reading of what he assumed. And then, so that was, and I knew it was coming, but at the same time, it was cool, I liked it. It definitely grew from the previous book, and you can see Jai has more of a goal now, whereas in book one, he didn't have so much of a goal. He had some sort of goal, but his main goal was to just escape, be free, and he was trying to help a lot of people. And I don't know, it's a hard one, because I do enjoy this series a lot. So I don't know if I want to say this book is stronger than book one, because I think I enjoy them both equally. There's definitely more in this book, and there's more in the world building side. So if that is really up your street, go for that. Like, the characters that are kind of cool, the characters are there, they're amazing. Like, Jai is learning as he's going through. He's not a cardboard cutout. He's a really strong character, but he's not something that you would get in like a Robin Hood book or Brandon Sanderson or John Gwynne. But at the same time, Jai is doing what he's set there to do. He's the viewpoint, he's the character, you're engaged with him, you care about him. It is enjoyable. I can definitely see how this book might not be for some people, because it's not as action-packed as some. So my heart belongs to Eragon. I kind of think, and I don't think I'm 100% right in this, but I think if you loved Eragon as a kid, you will love this series as an adult. But at the same time, I think if you're going into this series expecting a plot-driven, it is kind of plot-driven, but a expansive, big epic, you might not get it, right? There are moments in this where there isn't a lot of action. It's very much Jai moving through, learning and growing and getting to points to then get to the meat of what the series is about, which I believe is stopping the Sabites. But it takes a while to get there, so don't suddenly expect that this is now going to happen overnight, right? And it is only one viewpoint, so that can kind of weaken the story a little bit, but I think it works here in the sense that this is a story about Jai. This is a story about Jai coming back home to his homeland and taking back and stopping people from doing horrors. And there was one scene in this book that horrified me, and I never really thought about it, because again, it's a different culture, it's a different way of learning, of different culture. Am I learning what? It is a different culture, so it's completely different to what most people reading this book would probably know, but it's tribes. So Jai's culture is about tribes, different tribes, and people will conquer each other tribe, and they will be for no reason that they just want to. And there's a scene where Jai realizes he's horrified at this because he needs this tribe, but to get it he has to take it, and to take it he has to fight. And there's a couple of things, and it's minimal deaths, but at the same time you can feel that horror of, I'm now the villain here. I'm doing this purely because I just need to, I want to, I need to take you, so I'm taking it. And there are innocents standing there that get in his way, and it's just the way of the stepfolk. The stronger rules, and that's how it is. And you can see Jai realizing and coming to terms with that, oh, this is horrific what we've done, but there wasn't much other choice to do it because he needs to unite everybody. And I was reading it, I was like, this just doesn't feel good. Like, I would read anything else, gory battle, torture or whatever, but reading that I was like, oh, actually that's innocent people. That's people that have done nothing to you apart from just exist. And that is just the way of how that culture works, and it kind of just does bring that horrific side to each culture. Has a horrific side, nobody's perfect, but it does definitely bring that into light. And it was just, I don't know, I did enjoy it. It definitely made me feel uncomfortable, which was its intention, because Jai felt it as well. But I love how Jai grew in this. I love his journey through this. This would be a series I'd go back and I would just reread for comfort. If I had a brain fog day, if I was sick and I wanted something to entertain me, I'd pick the series up. This is what this series is. It's purely entertainment. It's not doing anything new. It's not flipping tropes, but it is adding more to the culture side of things. So if you want more of that side, it's perfect. But at the same time, it's entertaining. It sat there, it entertained me, and I absolutely adored it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. If you want dragons, you're gonna get dragons. This is kind of an epic story, but not an epic story. But I highly recommend the series. Please go pick it up. Drop down below if you think you're going to pick it up because of what have I said. Have you read Dragon Rider? Are you going to read it? Are you going to pick up book 2? Let me know down below. If you have any other Dragon Rider recs or just dragon book recs, let me know, because I'm always looking for more dragons. And I will see you in the next one.